Welcome back to this emergency edition of the Sabre Roundtable. My name is Jonah,
I'm Christian.
I'm JP.
and in this episode, we are really just going to talk about one thing. Casey Mittelstadt is no longer a Buffalo Sabre. After 7 years in the organization, he has been traded.
Absolutely crazy. When I saw that at work, I was like completely flabbergasted. Like I was just completely surprised, and I didn't even know how to react at first.
I probably had the busiest day at work I've had since starting this job today. And of course, it came on the exact same day where Buffalo sports news is just on fire the whole day. It's just headline after headline. And yeah, Mitt's getting traded. I mean, I can't say I didn't call it, guys. Not Mittelstadt, but saying like, told you there was going to be a surprise, and there was. And I didn't think it would be Casey, but here we are. Seemed inevitable at some point. Someone was going to go.
I was just about to leave. I had to be at work downtown about 2:30, and literally as I'm about to leave, I already had my phone in do not disturb, and I just checked it as I was about to leave the house, and there it was. And it wasn't even the trade; it was just everybody reacting to it. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta throw up a graphic before I left. So yeah, it was crazy, and I couldn't even really post any immediate thoughts because I had to be somewhere. It just seemed like Adams just made it at the worst time possible. But wow, I still very much in disbelief that it happened now, that it happened a full 48 hours before the deadline, in just the fashion it did. Like it just happened. There was nothing, no smoke, no the Sabres are intensifying talks. We'll see where it goes. It's just friggin' Kevin Weeks, man. That son of a gun just tweets out that it happens, and
Tweeting from was he in a closet? Where was he? Was
he's
he in
always
like
somewhere. I don't even remember where he was. I just read the tweet and just kind of went nuts. I was like, holy shit, this is happening now.
I think what
yeah,
surprised me the most is just that Kevin said multiple times, we're not shopping him, we're trying to re-sign him, and then they trade him. And I still believe they weren't shopping him. I think they were probably just approached, and they really liked how conversations went. But when he came out and said that multiple times, it's like, okay, like I genuinely believe he's going to be a Sabre for the next few years. So it just completely blew me out of the water.
yeah, there
Yeah.
were talks throughout the season, and I mean, there was always a little bit of smoke around him, but caught me off guard. Really, not the news I was expecting today. I was more or less expecting a Eric Johnson type trade, not a Casey Middlestat for Bowen Byram.
Well, stay tuned. You never know. That would be fun if we just got a trade break live on air. But yeah, I never really like. I got the sense they were always trading him. I think from the moment that Adams said that they had, they never talked to his agent. It only came out recently that they were planning to get to the negotiating table after the deadline, and obviously we never got to that point. But I always pictured that he probably would be on the move. I mean, that clip that I sent out about a month ago, explaining why I felt they should trade him. One of those reasons I just felt like they needed a shakeup, and he was the only guy that made like a ton of sense. I mean, there's other guys. We now have the rumor that Henry Haru is going to be on his way out, which we'll talk about. But I mean, other than that, everybody else that you could feasibly deal, it's not, it's not really going to shake up that room. I mean, Kyle Poso, Zemgus Girgensons, that'll shake up the room, but those were guys you knew at some point in the near future their tenures were going to come to an end. This was the move that you kind of felt, if it was made, that it was going to send shockwaves, and I don't know. I felt like that this move was coming, but definitely not in this fashion.
I was gonna say, don't get me wrong. I think it makes complete sense for Mitz to be the guy that was shipped out. but at the very least, I was not expecting it to be done by the deadline. Like maybe an off-season move I could have seen, like a sign and trade or something like that, but I was not expecting even this close to big of a trade to be happen today. It's just, I don't know. I think it's a move in the right direction, though. I think this season's been unacceptable, and they need to make some moves. And I think this is just the beginning of it. I truly do.
Evan Adams is no longer messing around, I should say. He made the big move. He said he wasn't afraid of big trades. He did it. What do I think of the trade? I mean, as of now, it's fine. I don't think we got fleeced. I don't think we fleeced them. I think the Colorado Avalanche has great center depth now. You could put Casey at 2C or 3C, whatever they see fit, and the Sabres got a great defensive prospect out of it, who has playoff experience at 22 years old.
He's got more than that. He's got a ring.
He's got a ring. He played serious minutes in the Cup Finals a couple years ago. The only thing that scares me, other than another left-handed defenseman on this team, but Rasmus Dahlin could play either side. I think they said on the broadcast tonight that he does prefer to play on the right side sometimes too, because he finds himself more versatile that way. And
if I can interject myself real quick, I just saw that we got word, according to Don Granado, that Byram's going to play tomorrow night in Nashville, or tonight, probably by the time this gets out. And he's going to be paired alongside Rasmus Dahlin.
Oh, look at that. Breaking news on the pod. When has that ever happened?
Yeah.
That's gonna be
It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to watch.
It's going to be fun. I'm excited to see him play tomorrow. Great. It seems like another great offensive type defenseman. I mean, we have a bunch of them, but it's another great addition. It's a welcome addition. But I'm just curious, is it like, and I know I've stated this in the past, and Jonah's been like, hey, the 06 team, they did it. They're all lefties back there. Do you really think, like, I mean, Byram has struggled to play the right, so you'd put him on the left. You could play Dahlin on the right side, and then you got Power and Samuelson on the left. Who else are we putting on the right?
Well, how about before we get there, let's actually like introduce what the trade was. I don't even think we kind of jumped the gun. So, Casey Mittelstadt has been dealt to the Colorado Avalanche in a straight up hockey trade. Bob McKenzie 1-for-1. Casey Mittelstadt for Bowen Byram. Definitely in contention for one of the big trades of the deadline. You know, we talked about it last episode towards the end. I brought it up. How every deadline, there's that two trades that nobody sees coming. It just appears out of thin air. And I think we have one of them. And I kind of wanted to see one of them. I did not expect it to be this. So Sabres shipping out Casey Mittelstadt, who has been a part of the organization since 2017, to the Colorado Avalanche for Bowen Byram, who was taken 4th overall back in 2019. Stanley Cup champion, was one of their most key players during that 2022 Stanley Cup run. But obviously there's some more things to talk about. It's not just so it's not a bookend. It's not, hey, this guy's fantastic and the Sabres got this guy for someone they didn't really want to keep around. There's definitely more to it. So let's get into it. So the storylines surrounding Bowen Byram. Great prospect, phenomenal draft pedigree, taken 4th overall back in 2019, and has a pretty good first 2 seasons, and these last 2 seasons have not quite lived up to that. Now, there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, probably the biggest cause of concern, the head injuries, the concussions that he's dealt with. He's dealt with multiple concussions, head injuries. There was a quote floating around I saw today from, I think, a piece, I don't know when it was written, that Byram was quoted as saying, like, every day he wakes up without a headache, he's thankful. Like he has been through the ringer. It's been bad for him, and going through that at such a young age, at 22 years old, there's definitely there's concern there. There's definitely any concussion history is it's definitely something that you kind of back away from. It definitely raises an eyebrow.
Yeah, you've seen it with Nolan Patrick, such a promising young athlete, just cut down in his prime. He had to retire. Just the head injuries, man. It's like they're sneaky. It's not like, tearing your ACL or, breaking your arm or blowing out your shoulder. It's your brain. That will follow you for Jesus. It's your brain. That will follow you for the rest of your life. That will stick with you. That is long-term effects. The healing process of the brain is not like any other part of the body. And I'm not a doctor, but we've seen it before. So something that's probably my biggest concern with this entire trade. So I pray he stays healthy and hopefully he has a long career and a flourishing one with the Sabres.
Yeah, it is scary. It's another, if you want to put him and Samuelson together, it's another defenseman that has injury issues that can't stay on the ice. But with that being said, like if Kyle Poso has had concussion problems and he's lasted for a long time after that. So it's possible to, get past it, to avoid those hits. But it's unpredictable. It could happen anytime. It could just be a little blow to the head too. So it is scary, and hopefully he can stay healthy. But we'll just have to wait and see.
It's tough, JP. Not all of us are Dado Poso, okay? Not everyone's built like that.
No, you bring up a good point because there's two sides to it. I mean, you have the Nolan Patricks who, definitely a similar type of situation, a highly touted prospect, showed signs of greatness in the NHL, but just torn down before he could even get his feet off the ground. But there's the other side of it. I mean, we've seen Kyle Okposo, who has probably been through more head injuries than, probably anybody in the league. I mean, it was like 3-4. The first one was the worst. He nearly died from it. But here he is today. He's played three pretty full seasons. He's been super reliable, even in like a more, I guess, physically demanding role. So, there's two sides to that. And then, you think of someone like Sidney Crosby, who you thought was going to have to retire in the middle of his prime, and he came back. And, I mean, geez, he's 35, 36 now, and he's putting on a heart campaign. So there's two sides to it. It's not one way or the other. It's just something that hopefully you come out on the better side of. For the next sort of, I guess, hiccup where this all comes in is that, he hasn't, even when he has played the last 2 seasons probably, it hasn't been his best hockey. Now, there's a few reasons for that. One thing that's been going around recently, he's been playing the right side, which he's been quoted as saying he doesn't like. He doesn't like playing that right side. It's very picky who enjoys being on their offhand. We know Rasmus Dahlin enjoys doing so. Owen Power's done it. Yeah, I think he was actually playing right side a bit tonight against Toronto. So it's something that Colorado has made him do, and he hasn't been fully on board with. And I think you're going to see tomorrow night in Nashville when he's with Rasmus Dahlin, he's not going to be forced to do that. He's going to be on the left side. And, I'm sure if you want to talk about the lead up to this trade, look, we've known that the Sabres have been following Colorado for not weeks, months. And, they've probably done their homework on him. This is probably a guy they've wanted for quite some time. And as we've seen in some of the micro stats and what he can provide there, he loves the rush offense. So this is a guy who might really, if he can steady himself on that left side, get back into an offensive system that suits him. We can talk about some of the system, the whispers about what the Sabres want to do with their system moving forward. And Byram has like a real opportunity to flourish here.
was gonna say I don't I don't know a ton about what the Avs system is like, but I imagine it's not as run and gun as ours. And just hearing how that is his play style, I think he could thrive in our system, especially if he's going to play with Don Lean. So I think if you want to, get back to the offensive system that we have, the rush style offense, he's the perfect move to put back there.
Yeah, I mean, if we want more symmetry throughout the lineup, I guess moving Casey Middlestat out made sense if you're going with a, full on rush type offense. I mean, Casey was more of a, slow the play down and control the puck, and he was a more, methodically work your way down the ice type of guy. And of course, that has its place. He was our leading point scorer this year, and that'll definitely be missed. But I mean, again, if you want more synergy throughout the lineup, that's a trade that, fits that narrative.
And it should be mentioned, like it another thing that is a bit worrying, if he's not doing well in the Colorado system, that's a team that's done very well the last 2-3 years, and for him to kind of struggle in that does kind of make you raise an eyebrow a bit. So there's that too, and I think that's the biggest thing about this trade, because I want to get into, like, we've talked about Bowen Byram, and look, the upside is there. He's one of the best skaters in the league. Like, Sabres fans are in for a treat when they see him tomorrow night. There are not too many times where he steps onto the ice and there's a better skater out there with him. And he's got a phenomenal shot. Like, for anybody that hates Owen Power's shot or rolls their eyes when he loads up, you're going to love Bowen Byram. He's like the anti-Power in that regard. His career shooting percentage is like 11% as a defenseman. That's nuts. That's not a small sample size. He's played 146 games. That's a pretty sizable sample size. He's very toolsy, and the upside is so evident. So, the upside's there, but when you're looking at the grand scheme of things, when it comes to this trade, it's obviously worth mentioning what the Sabres are sending out. And what the Sabres are sending out is the better hockey player. I'm gonna come clean in terms of like what I think about this trade. I don't like the Sabres cannot win this in the short term for a few reasons. First of all, Mittelstadt's the better player right now. He just is. Everybody's seen the stats going around, different models, J-Fresh, Evolving Hockey. They're not pretty on Byram, and they're much more favorable towards Mittelstadt. And they're going to two completely different situations. One team is trying to get their feet out of the mud. The other one's looking to win the Stanley Cup. I don't think it's possible you win this trade in the short term. Casey Mittelstadt is going to a loaded Colorado team. They also got Sean Walker today. That's a fantastic pickup for them. Got rid of Ryan Johansson. Mittelstadt's going to be playing playoff hockey and probably deep into the spring. You're going to see him play important games. You're probably going to see him score big goals. It's probably going to be reminiscent of what Reinhart did last playoffs. It's going to sting. The game that the Sabres are playing here, they're playing the long game. If they win this, if they want to win this trade, Byram has to be a long-term fit. It has to work out. And it can go either direction. It can go very, very bad. The head injuries can persist. The system just might not be for him. He just doesn't fit in well. That can happen. Or it can swing the other way. He lives up to the pedigree that he created for himself back in 2018, 2019 as a prospect, and builds on his rookie season with the Avalanche and becomes what he can be, which Bowen Byram's upper potential is a top pairing defenseman. And if he gels well with Rasmus Dahlin and that's your pair, that's scary. That is scary. That means you have Owen Power with Mattias Samuelsson, with Ryan Johnson down on the lower pairs. The trickle-down effect is monumentous. And that's what's going on here. That's what they're playing for. But to call this trade boom or bust would be an understatement.
Always playing the long game. Never the buyer, always the sellers, all that good stuff. Kind of reminiscent of, no, it's not. I was going to compare it to the Ryan O'Reilly trade, but
it's not it's not totally different from that.
no, of course not. I mean, when you went with the O'Reilly trade,
how old was O'Reilly when he was traded?
I can't remember, but when you went with the O'Reilly trade, you were kind of doing the same thing. You brought in Tage Thompson, it was more of a project, way more of a project.
Yeah.
And you got a couple other guys, one of them was, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. One of them was an asshole. The other one, unfortunately, destroyed his knee in Sweden, and we never saw him again. But it's also not the same. This trade is 1-for-1. And B, the Ryan O'Reilly trade was a lot uglier. You had a guy who was forcing his way out of Buffalo.
I wouldn't say forcing.
Not forcing.
They felt forced.
They felt forced. They felt forced to make a switch. Casey wanted to be here. He loved it here. He even said he was completely shocked when he heard his name being shopped around earlier this season. So yeah, they're not totally, they're not totally the same, but they're not too far off. I mean, I'd rather be in this situation than an O'Reilly situation, just because, it doesn't affect the culture of the team as much. In a negative way. I mean, the stigma around the locker room was that there was, a locker room cancer. This is more or less just, a mutual parting of the ways. And it's sad, of course. We traded Rasmus Dahlin's best friend. But I'm just excited to see Bowen Byram play tomorrow in Nashville. I didn't even realize he was going to be in Nashville tomorrow. I thought we wouldn't see him till next week sometime.
I am really excited. It should turn into some fun hockey again when he's out on the ice. But like Jonah said, I think this is going to hurt a lot this season. I think Mitz is going to have a great postseason with the Avalanche, but you got to look at the bigger picture. And this could, if this trade works out, it could be the perfect sell high on a player and buy low on another player. It could work out completely on our side. Mitz might never put up a season as good as he was doing this first half of the season. I mean, he's already cooled off the second half of the season. He hasn't been as impactful. He was looking like a point per game player earlier this season. And recently, I mean, I think he had 3 points in 10 games, or it was something around there, and he was still impactful, but he might never replicate the season. So if you want to try and sell high on a player, you want to get rid of someone when his value is probably the highest it might ever be, this is the time to cash in on it. And if you were to think about this, even last year or 2 years ago, someone were to tell you that Casey Mittelstadt got traded 1-for-1 for Bowen Byram, they would have thought that the Avalanche were the biggest idiots in the world and just completely threw away one of the best prospects in the league at the time. So I'm really looking at this in the bigger picture, not just the short term, but it can definitely backfire on us. There's no doubt. But I'm looking forward to him. I think he can fit our system really well. And I wish Casey the best of luck. It's going to be really easy to root for him. He posted in the one Instagram comment section that it was an honor playing for us. So it's going to be really easy to root for him this postseason and the rest of his career.
I hope from this point on that Kevin Adams really gets I don't want to say people stop calling him inactive. I think that at times it can still be fair to say that, but I hope that it removes the stigma that he's not willing to make a big boy move, because I don't think it's going to go down as the trade, but it is definitely going to be one of the big ones when we look back at his tenure at general manager to see if it was successful or not. I mean, it is the biggest boom or bust trade. Definitely the biggest boom or bust trade he's ever made. I'm trying to think back to a bigger trade for the Sabres that was this boom or bust. I mean, probably the Ryan O'Reilly trade. I mean, you're trading someone who is a proven NHL top six, middle six, whatever you want to call him, producer, and you're taking a chance on a prospect that has not panned out to this point. It's very ballsy. It's ballsy, and he's this is the type of move he hasn't made yet. So it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes from here, what it does for him, and how we look back on it in a few years.
Obviously, we've been defenders of Kevyn Adams a little more than the rest of the Sabres fans, but I hope that this move does not shut people up, but show people that Kevyn, he's not just always sitting on his hands. Like, I thought it was kind of ironic. Some of the tweets that I was looking at today, it was the same people who were complaining that Kevyn Adams never makes a move, and now he makes a move and people are complaining. So I think this really is a signal for moves to come. I don't think he's done. We'll talk about it in a bit, but Yoki Haru might be on the move, but I think this offseason is going to be really active. I think this is a really prove-it kind of deal and prove-it kind of offseason for Kevyn Adams. So I'm expecting a lot to go down, and I think this is just the start. I genuinely believe that.
It's his first offseason move because this is for next year. And, it's funny. Whenever I pictured the Casey Mittelstadt, when I pictured him being traded, it wasn't in a move like this. I always had it pictured in my mind he was going to be a part of something bigger. But there's a real possibility that this is going to go down as the Casey Mittelstadt trade, which I just wasn't expecting it to go down like that. Just interesting.
Just a shock.
Just a shock. It's just a shock. I truly did not believe it was going to go down this early right now. But it goes back to last episode, how at the end we were talking about, the idea of moving Okposo. It's so, to me, kind of enticing because it's a shakeup. It's gonna change that locker room, and I think it's the type of reaction they need. It's a little kick in the ass to tell them, look, it's time. Like, we have to. A type of loss tonight against Toronto, it just can't happen anymore. It's put up or shut up.
I do wonder, the only thing about this trade that I don't think it should worry anybody, but I do wonder that Kevyn Adams went out publicly and said that we're not shopping mitts, and then we traded him. So I do wonder how that sits with players in the locker room and even players who might want to sign here or be traded here. Like, Kevin's has been very do right by the player his whole tenure here, pretty much. I mean, think about Asplund last year and giving him a shot. He's been very do right by the player, and I think this is kind of the opposite. Mittelstadt wanted to stay here. He was surprised that his name was even out there. Adams said how he wants to re-sign him, and then he's just kind of all of a suddenly traded. So I do wonder how that sits with people.
It's a business. It's a business, man.
I do somewhat agree with that in the sense that, I wonder what Mittelstadt's reaction to it was or what the player's reaction to it was. But he's still doing right by the player because look at where the guy's going.
Yeah.
And I think it was Lance Lysowski of the Buffalo News. It was his column when he talked to Adams, I think in the past week. He was saying how the Sabres have kind of been applauded for how they've treated each of the guys they've shipped out. Eichel, cup contender, got his cup. Reinhart went to a President's Trophy winner, probably the cup favorite this year. Ristolainen, looking like he might make the playoffs for the first time in his career this season. And now Casey Mittelstadt, going to probably he's going to, depending on who you talk to, the favorite in the West. I don't think they're the favorite, but they're the Colorado Avalanche. And he's all four of those guys playing prime roles. So it's very much shaking up the room, giving them a kick in the ass while still doing right by the players. So I give props to Adams in that regard. It's just just to go back to the trade, like it's just super, super risky, and a lot of things need to go right for it to work out.
Hey, I'm glad Kevin Adams is willing to take that risk after this season. He could have gone, the Yeiser plan route next year and just signed a ton of vets, and he's still taking risk, and I respect that completely because realistically, if we have another bad season next year, his job's probably on the line, and he's not scared of that. So he's going to keep taking risk, and he's going to do what he believes to make this team better. The other thing that we haven't mentioned yet is that Byram has some familiarity with some of our players. He's a good friend of Cousins. He's known Krebs for a while. So he is coming onto this team, and he already knows people, which I think will help. And Cousins and Krebs have already spoken how they're excited to play with them. So that's just one other thing to add. He already has some connections in the room, which is good.
The vibes are high. Keep them high. This just seemed like it was due. After this season, something had to change. And I know we sound like broken records right now, but I think we're all just still in shock that it actually happened. And probably more trades to come in the next 48 hours.
I was going to say, it definitely, it's kind of weird that this isn't the end point. You think This is the big Magnus opus, and we still got two more days. So see how it goes. But I think we should get into Chad's article. So Chad Dieteminesis of Expected Buffalo giving us some real good insight via his article about the topic, and there's a couple key notable things. Let's get into Mittelstadt himself. Why did the Sabres make this trade? So firstly, and most probably importantly, the Sabres were beginning to question his play style and how it affected them. More specifically, Mittelstadt loves to slow down the game, and we know this. He's fantastic on the wall. He looks for that trailer. He's always looking for the streaking guy, and when it works, it works. And he's a great playmaker, and he can make it work. But there were times where the team felt like he had a high turnover rate, and it resulted in a team counterattacking them, and it was a very boomer bust play style, and it was very east-west, and the Sabres want to get a north-south game going. And with the Sabres system struggles this season, according to Chad, from who he's talked to, organizationally, the Sabres want to get back to playing with speed, getting them up the ice, putting pressure on the other team, and getting back to that play style that we all fell in love with last season. And Byram, obviously being a very rush-heavy defenseman, if you even look at a Byram highlight reel, all of his goals, he's jumping up on the rush, doing what he can to help drive play on that side. So it's interesting. It's interesting that the organization feels that it's somewhat encouraging. Like, they recognize that what we're watching is not fun to watch, and they want to change that. And it's interesting that they identified Mittelstadt as possibly a problem. So it's interesting.
As long as they try and keep it sustainable, because that style of play, you never know, it could get one-dimensional. It's fun, but you got to figure out a way to keep it sustainable. And I think that's kind of what they tried to do in the offseason with their little system change, and they overcorrected. So maybe there's got to be some sort of middle ground. Maybe that just comes with, maybe it just comes with age or experience, but it's something that needs to happen because we can't have another season like this next year.
Yeah, it was really interesting for me to read that because I guess I would have never kind of thought of that, but now to think about it, it does make sense. Mittelstadt, every single time he enters his zone, he stops right after the blue line, tries to find the open guy, and he does slow it down, which is great. But I could see that it doesn't really play to our strengths. But at the same time, like you do need complementary players. You can't have all the players play the exact same way. So like I see that point, but at the same time, like he was so good this season, it's hard to fault him for playing how he plays when he's been our top scorer. So I understand it, but at the same time, we don't want 17 of the same players out there. You know, I don't know. It's at least it's very thought provoking for me because I would have never thought of that.
Yeah, I see both sides to it. I see why the Sabres might think that. He is very much the anti-rush player. But like you said, like you need I mean, yeah, he's a slow player, but you do need different type of players. Now there you can survive without Casey Middlestat. It's just hopefully they don't have the same blueprint for every player. And I'm not saying they do, but hopefully they don't. So the next thing was obviously a big piece of all this was Casey Middlestat's contract and what that was going to look like. It just didn't seem feasible. They made their commitments to Thompson, to Cousins. They're going to have to make commitments to Peterka, to Quinn, and they've got so many forward prospects in the system. It didn't seem feasible for him to be around long term. Now, the interesting thing that Chad points out is that from who he's talked to, it doesn't seem like Roseanne or Kulik, they're going to be back up at all this season. The organization doesn't think they're ready. Obviously, as we know, they've gone kind of quiet ever since the World Juniors. And another thing being that, the Sabres, we've heard their names in a lot of trade talks recently. More specifically, Scott Lawton and Tommy Novak. And Chad thinks that they're still exploring their options, seemingly for a third line center moving forward. So it's a little, we've had the Krebs conversation recently, and we think he can thrive in that role. But look, I don't have a problem with looking to upgrade. It's just, if Krebs is the best guy next up, that's where he should be. If you get somebody better than him, that's fine. It just means you have better depth. The whole Peyton Krebs stuff looks a lot less frustrating if Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins aren't having the seasons they're having.
Yeah, and I hope at the very least they give Krebs these last how many games we have left. They give him this tryout and see how he does. But it's also going to be tough because our forward depth it's already with Mitz gone. Like our forward group already looks very shaky, especially if we also move Poso, Gergensen, Olofsson. So I think it still will be tough to get a full tryout with Krebs because he probably won't be playing with the best people all the time. He was with Benson and Greenway today. Greenway's not the most offensive player. But I agree, if they can upgrade from him, I'm fine. But I still want them to give him a chance.
On to the defense. So this is the real meat of the conversation. The Buffalo Sabres think they have their core of defensemen. Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, Mateus Samuelsson, and Bowen Byram. They think they have their top four locked in. Who's on the outside looking in? Seemingly Henry Jokiharju. So like Mittelstadt, 24 years old, arbitration eligible defenseman after this season. It doesn't seem like the Sabres want to pay him any more than he's already making. So it seems like he's the odd man out, and he might get dealt as soon as this Friday.
Another thing I wasn't really expecting, to be honest with you. I was just considering that he was just going to get re-signed in the offseason for an amount because we don't have a lot of right-handed defensemen on this team, and Jokiharju's been playing well. He has not been one of the worst defensemen on our team. Those guys are getting scratched night in and night out, and Yoki's been in the lineup almost the entire year. So
this season's been a real good story for him. It kind of surprises me. Like, compared to last season, he was on everybody's shit list. It felt like a lot of nights. And I don't like he's played up to, like, he's been the guy Dahlin has played the best with this season. So it is really interesting that they're just ready to move on, which is crazy.
I mean, the writing was on the wall, considering he was scratched earlier in the season, like over Eric Johnson at times. So I'm not surprised he's on. He's on the outside looking in. But I'm not sure if I agree with it, because I think he has had a really good season, and to be honest, I don't really care about the handedness of defensemen, but he is our only right-handed defenseman. I think everybody's overplaying the all left hand a little much. They're all overreacting. But I get the concern. But at the same time, he is our only right-handed defenseman that's actually good now.
Yeah, I don't put much stock into it. But, if you can get a right-handed defenseman who is good, I prefer it. And I also prefer that my only right-handed defenseman isn't Connor Clifton. But it's looking like for a little bit that might be the case.
It's definitely, of course, more ideal to have left-handed, right-handed, 3-3. It's, of course, more ideal. But I'm more concerned about having good players and talent than just worrying about left-handedness versus right-handedness.
Fair enough.
So we will see where that goes. I guess Henry Jokiharju's time is coming to an end as a Buffalo Sabre. On to the other thing. They still see Mattias Samuelsson as a core piece. And to some people, that might not seem surprising considering his long-term contract. They committed to him as, he was one of the first guys they committed to. But they're also, there's been a lot of discourse about dealing him. His unavailability is no doubt, I mean, it's annoying for us. I can only imagine it's annoying for the organization having to basically pencil him out of the lineup for 30 games. And, it hasn't been the most linear development. He's been good defensively this year. Last year he really wasn't. And, the theme from both seasons has been his injury trouble. But I think it can change, though. If Samuelsson has another injury-riddled season next year, I think it might begin to make them think they can't treat him as what he's perceived to be by a lot of people, which is a shutdown defenseman.
Yeah, I'm fine with him being considered part of the core. We've committed to him, so I don't think anybody should be expecting a move this year. I could see it maybe in the future, but if you think about those other three-core defensemen, they're all offensive defensemen. And, you do need some good defensive defensemen. And, I mean, even if you just compare the rest of our roster, Clifton, Bryson, Ryan Johnson, they're all more offensive puck-moving defensemen. Samuelson's the only change of pace kind of guy back there for us, more of a lockdown guy. So I think it makes sense why he should be considered part of the core. And I think he was pretty good last year. He obviously struggled this year, but let's see how he does next year. I still have a lot of hope for him. But yeah, he needs to stay healthy. I mean, that's no doubt an issue.
Maybe it's just bad luck. I don't know.
It's a style of game. I mean, we want someone who's more physical, block shots, and he fits that role very good. But I mean, that leads to more injuries.
No doubt, he obviously plays a much different style. And I'm sure they do value that to an extent. I mean, he separates himself from the rest of the core from the way he plays. The other thing I wanted to discuss, I mean, it's seeming like Jokiharju is looking to leave and, be dealt out of here. Just thinking about next year is super interesting because I guess Jokiharju's out now. I guess just thinking about what the core is next year, it raises a few questions because you have your top four, supposedly. If Byram, I'm crossing my fingers Byram really gels with Dahlin because, man, I can't watch any more of Samuelsson Dahlin. It has not looked good this year. Samuelson. Power, on the other hand, it's looked pretty good at times. But like when you're looking lower down the lineup, that bottom pair, are they gonna pencil in it being Johnson and Clifton? I mean, they could. Like that's a top six that it looks decent. That's a feasible group. I mean, we're gonna see it. We're gonna see basically that group this season. I mean, not Samuelson,
Not
but
Samuelson. Yeah.
you're gonna see most of it. And I guess it just raises the question going in next offseason, because I thought when we were going back and forth today, I proposed the idea that maybe they were looking to get rid of Samuelson, and a large part of that was based on the handedness thing. But obviously that doesn't seem to be the case. I just don't know if that's the group. Like I feel like he's not done touching that, and I don't know. I thought back to something that we actually didn't touch on last episode when we were talking about the Chris Tanev trade. The Sabres were in on him for the last 2 months. Like they really wanted him to come here, and it didn't work out. It was implied it was no trade clause. It was because of that, but at no point did it say Tanev didn't want to come to Buffalo. It just said he wanted to go to Dallas for the cup run to be a playoff team. So I do sort of wonder, during the offseason if they revisit that, because he played hockey at RIT and the Sabres wanted an extension if they got him. Like they really want this guy, and he just makes a ton of sense. He's one of the best shutdown D-men in the NHL. So that was just an idea I had today. It just kind of made sense, because you're looking at the Sabres decor. I think it's basically like it's a finished product outside, I think, of one outside addition. Like if Yoki gets traded and then they bring someone else in, and then you have Clifton and Johnson as your 6-7. So I think other than that is all you can really digest from this trade. It's been a crazy day. I mean, geez, do we even need to get into everything that happened with the Bills? It's been a crazy day. Definitely not the way we expected it to go down. I saw the TNT just recap the trade real quickly, and they showed Byram in a Sabres jersey and Mittelstadt in a Colorado jersey. And man, it
looks weird.
It looks so weird. It just doesn't look right. But it's been a crazy day. So I thought, to end this on a somewhat, I guess it's melancholy, but also kind of fun. I thought it'd be fun if we just kind of recapped our favorite memories as Casey was a Buffalo Sabre. So what were your guys' favorite moments? I mean, it was a 7 years that didn't really amount to anything. Which part of the reason it kind of stinks, but there was some good stuff mixed in there every now and then.
We always love some good Mittelstadt mode, right? I don't know. I would say it was probably before he even wore a Sabres jersey. At the World Juniors when they were in Buffalo. I got to see him play in that outdoor game. What did he have? He had like 3 assists in that game.
I thought he was going to be a superstar after that game.
Yeah.
I mean, doing that on that, like the biggest stage the World Juniors has ever been in, outdoors, in that shitty weather. Like the ice was terrible. He goes out there, has 3 apples, leads them to a victory. And then,
comeback victory.
Goes on to win tournament MVP. Like I thought he was going to be a superstar after that.
And that goal against Slovakia too.
Oh,
that was probably the best. Yeah,
that was just a special time. I know how it sounds, but it almost was a special time to be a fan, because he was the prospect everybody was talking about, and he dominated that World Juniors. And I still remember where I was when he signed his entry level. Like he was. It was a very like I said, it sounds weird, but it was almost a special time to be a fan.
I remember I was playing a hockey game when I found out that we drafted him. So it's been a wild ride, there were some downs in the beginning, but I'm glad we ended up on a high note,
7 years. Damn.
Yeah.
I
Nuts.
think the two moments that I think of, the obvious one is the RJ one. I mean, RJ's final call, he scores the game winner in overtime. I was at the game. Um, it it's just there was no better way to end it than to be an overtime goal, and for Mitz to be that, I mean, he's always going to remember. He's always going to be remembered in Buffalo Sabres for that. And the other one that I always think of is, what was it? I believe Devin Levi's first win. Didn't they score? And then he went to celebrate with Darlene on the wall, and then they both looked at it like, "Oh, we got to go celebrate."
Oh, that was Anderson's last start.
Oh,
That was Anderson's last start, yeah.
I knew I was mixing it up, but I always think of that too because they pan at Mitz, he goes to celebrate, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I should probably go celebrate with my goalie down there." So I always think of that, and I think the other thing that I will miss most is all Mittelstadt memes. There's so many that came out this year.
I'm never
out
deleting
of-
those.
out of
There's
nowhere.
so many.
Just out of
I'm-
nowhere, he just became the best meme. It was just so funny. Some of the versions of those, like, it just started. Oh, he's going Mittelstadt mode, and then you just saw all like the Wolf meme or the Peter Griffin one. Like, it's just funny stuff.
People are purging their camera rolls for those. I will never delete those. They're staying in the camera roll, and I'll still use them. I will still use them from time to time. Not as frequently anymore, of course, but they'll have their place, you know. Who knows? Maybe somewhere down the road, Mittelstadt will find his way back to the team.
RJ's last call, that's a good one. Anderson's last start. One of mine definitely towards the end of last season, him winning it in MSG. Like that was a near and dear moment because I was just, that's probably the biggest high I've had as a Sabres fan in quite some time. We asked some of you guys what your favorite moments were, and just scrolling through them, there's some overlap. RJ's last call, the win against the Rangers. One of them that I definitely remember is somebody said his goal against the Penguins in his rookie season. That's a goal. That was the one during the streak where they were losing 4-1 to the Penguins, and he was the one that tied the game. I still remember that goal. Kyle Okposo slid it across. He friggin' sniped it over, I think it was over Jari's shoulder. And I remember Dunleavy's call. It was so good, and it was just, it was a fantastic goal, a great moment. Obviously, they go on to win that game. Just fun times.
When you're a fan of this team specifically, man, you got to enjoy the little moments when they come. I would kill for a 10-game win streak right now.
But yeah, I think that's for the most part. It's going to be an end to Casey Mittelstadt's time in Buffalo. It ends on a bit of ended out of nowhere. Didn't really, there's not much you're really going to remember about it in terms of accomplishments, but Casey was a soldier. There was one tweet that I was going to put out eventually. It was a tweet that I had bookmarked back in 2021 that I was saving in the scenario that, well, I'll just read the tweet. This was from Lance Lysowski. When Tampa Bay won the Stanley Cup, Casey Mittelstadt texted Dylan Cousins, "We need one of those." And Cousins quoted as saying, "We all have that vision, and we all believe that it can come true. We're just going to do what we can every day to get better and better, and hopefully reach that one day." And Mittelstadt's not going to be there in the event that happens, and it stinks. But I think what I might remember Casey the most for is the day after Eichel, Reinhart, Risto, they had their locker cleanouts. He went on that day. Cousins went on, and I think Darlene went on. And I remember Casey's interview I haven't watched in a while, but from what I remember, there was a lot of resentment in his voice that those guys left and they didn't want to be here. And I think he really wanted to be here. He really wanted to prove something. And he was one of the first shining, one of the beacons of hope when Granato first took over, because he had that really strong finish to the season. So I appreciate him for that. He was one of the guys that wanted to stick around.
Yeah, he will be missed. It was an honor to watch him, and I wish him best the rest of his career. I'll happily be a fan of him.
I know what team I'm cheering for this playoffs.
I don't know if I'd go that far. Somebody said, I hope he wins the Conn Smythe. I'm like, oh, I can't do that
Not
again.
again.
I can't do that again. Please, no.
Then it'd really be
no.
the Ryan O'Reilly trade all over again.
I hope he does well, but I hope he doesn't do that well. All right, I think that's going to wrap this one up. We went a lot longer than I thought we would, but obviously a big, momentous day. Definitely one of the days we're going to remember in Kevyn Adams' tenure. And it is a bit of an end of an era because Mittelstadt has been here for 7 years. But we wish him all the best, and we wish Bowen Byram the best of luck. I'm very excited to watch him tomorrow, and we'll see where it goes from here. And after this, we'll talk to you guys on Sunday like we planned, or for Monday, whenever it is. We'll recap the Predators game, the Oilers game, and whatever went down on deadline day.
Sounds good. See you then.
But I think other than that, that'll wrap up this episode. If you want to follow us on Twitter, follow us at The Sabre Report, on Instagram at The Sabre Report. Follow us on TikTok, subscribe to us on YouTube, get updates of the pod at Sabre Report Pod. Go give our friends over at the Buffalo Sports Talk podcast a listen and a follow because they got a lot to talk about. Very quickly, what'd you guys think about the comparison that we tweeted out? July 1st, 2007 to today.
I think I do get the comparison. The only thing is that they were free agents, so they kind of just walked. This is a purge we're talking about here.
I just thought it was crazy. Like, you don't.
It is. It's crazy.
It went down on one day. I think that's the biggest.
Dude,
it's kind of whoa.
Like I said, I had the busiest day at work I've had in a long time, and my phone would not stop going off. Like anytime I'd put my phone in my pocket and go back to work, I'd look at it 15 minutes later. I'm like, oh, look, they just cut Mitch Morris. Oh, look, Jordan Poyer's gone. Oh, Trey White is gone. Oh, who else is gone? Deontay Hardy. Like, Jesus. Like, Bean he
never turned off his phone.
He went to
today.
work. He went to work today. And, I think it's all for the best. And Vaughn renegotiated deal. We are back. Super Bowl run is back.
Until we have a defensive draft.
Hey, look, I'm just saying you gotta. Other than a wide receiver, you have to expect it.
I wouldn't be.
I wouldn't be mad.
It goes without saying they need a safety. I get it. I get it. I'm just all aboard the wide receiver train.
Take the wide receiver in the first round, shut everyone up, and then just take all defensive players.
That's valid.
Yep. I know they're recording tonight, so if you're listening to this right now, go listen to them after this because they are going to have a lot to talk about. More than us, to be honest.
Way more than us.
BST Thursday tomorrow. Both podcasts release an episode. Yeah. All right, folks, we're not going to keep you around any longer. Christian, we're going to let you go to bed. JP, I know you're not going to bed.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next time. Take care and go Sabres.
Go Sabres.
Go Sabres.